So, unless your business really needs an office space and really needs a rental, maybe you can find someone that's a really cool landlord and you get it really cheap. But do you have to get an office?
Welcome back to the Moving to Japan podcast. I'm your host, Ziv Nakajima again, and if you're new here, this podcast is dedicated to all of you out there who are either in the process of or thinking about relocating to the land of the rising sun, as well as for those among you who are in the business of relocating others to Japan, so HR managers, global mobility managers, business owners whose business or part of their business is to help employees and their families move to, work, and settle here. Whether you're coming here or relocating employees here for a short period of time or as far as the eye can see, this podcast is for you. We're going to be talking about everything from the move itself to daily life, culture and language barriers and nuances, the logistics of it all, and much, much more. Pick the brain of various industry leaders and experts in their field, all around this topic of moving to Japan. Alright, so for today's episode, not sure if our listeners are aware, but I've got another company here in Japan that handles real estate transactions and management on behalf of foreigners. We, along with other real estate experts here in Japan, organize a biannual conference every April and October in Tokyo, where property professionals, property owners and buyers, and just generally property enthusiasts gather to meet and hear from industry experts on various topics. One of the presentations in last month's summit was by Nick Woolsey from Japan Remotely, who's already been on this podcast a couple of times in the past. And he gave a very insightful and funny presentation on various creative strategies that people who are moving to Japan can utilize as far as office space goes. So buying versus renting, making sure the office space complies with immigration department requirements for granting a business management or startup visa, and plenty of related information on this very interesting topic. So here's his presentation for you. If you're not tuning in via YouTube, we'll also link to the video in this episode's show notes. You might be interested in viewing this one on YouTube so that you can see the slides that Nick is referring to, but not essential. His words are pretty self-explanatory. So enjoy Nick's presentation, and I'll see you again on the other side.
So you made it. I think I'm the last presentation for today. It's a lot of information, so good job to you all, and thanks so much to Ziv and Emil and Blanca and everybody who organized. And so let's give everybody a round of applause. Thank you. And I really enjoyed that presentation by Akiyamart. Have you guys been on their site yet? Yeah. I moved to the States from Japan a while ago. I lived in Japan for about 10 years, and now that I'm back in the States, I really like to go on Akiyamart's website and go through the map and see the little different properties all over the country and imagine what it would be like to move there. And be like, what if I lived in Hokkaido? What if I lived in Okinawa? But if you're living abroad or you don't have residency in the US, how does that work exactly? And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. How can you move to Japan? So I'll give you a little story about how I moved to Japan. And when I first did it, it was pretty simple because I got a job and I had a work visa. And it was the perfect job for me. It was called a coordinator for international relations. All right, this is going to be great. So these are bilingual public servants that work in Japanese communities to connect them with international organizations like Sister Cities or UNESCO. And I was really stoked about the job. And I had just finished my university training. I went and studied Japanese language at university, and then I got my MBA right afterward. So I felt like with my language and my business ability that I was qualified for the job, and I was excited to start bringing value to the community. When I arrived, I got the honor to participate in a traditional song and dance. And this was part of a cultural exchange we first did. And so I'd like to do that with you now, if you don't mind. Would you all please stand up? toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, that was weak. Let's do it again. Really fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. All right, good job. You can sit down. Thanks for humoring me, guys. So, the job was nothing like I had expected. There was no UNESCO, there was no sister cities. By all intents and purposes, I was what you call an assistant language teacher, or ALT. And a lot of people come to Japan the first time with this job. But that's not what I signed up for. I was going to be a coordinator for international relations. So now don't get me wrong. Some parts of the job were really fun. I got to be a human tape recorder in the morning. This is an apple. And in the afternoons, I got to be a human jungle gym like in this picture. But it wasn't as professionally satisfying as I would have hoped. But that is the problem with getting a job, especially in Japan. The duties that you're going to be doing at a job where you're hired is going to depend on your employer. What they say, you do. So now that I'm older and wiser, if I were to go back and do it all over again and move to Japan, I would want greater control over my professional responsibilities and greater control over my career. And so, as some of you are maybe thinking, I want to move to Japan and use a property to do so, think about the lifestyle that you want. And if you want control over what you're doing, plan on being your own boss. My name is Nick, and I am a relocation consultant for people who want to move to Japan. What that means is, to me, I help people understand their visa options and to make decisions to have a great lifestyle after they move to Japan. And what I'm going to be talking about today is a great visa option for many independent people like you, hello online, called the Business Manager Visa. And specifically, I'm going to go into detail on one of the requirements for the Business Manager Visa, which is office space. Now, what is the Business Manager Visa? The Business Manager Visa is a visa type that allows you to live in Japan and own a business. And the way it works is that the business that you own is what you use to sponsor your own visa so that you have the right to make money and work in Japan. And as we just talked about, it's a great vehicle for people who want to do different things because there's a lot broader things you could be doing with this type of visa than a work visa. You could open a bar. You could do something related to international relations. Or, as many of you are thinking about, you could have a short-term rental business. Another nice thing about this visa is that it is a long-term resident visa, which means that you're allowed to stay in Japan for a long period of time. Typically, when you first start out with this visa, you'll be granted a 1-year stay, but it's possible to get up to 5 years. Now, another thing that's different from a work visa that's really attractive is that on a work visa, you need to spend 10 years in Japan before you have access to permanent residency. But if you get a 5-year period on your business manager visa, then that will allow you to get access to permanent residency if you want to be here full time. Now, there's some problems with the business manager visa. It's very difficult to get, and that's fair to the Japanese government. They don't want just anyone coming and saying, "Oh, I have a business, visa please." They want to make sure that people with legitimate business interests are the ones that are coming to Japan. So the first thing that they are going to be checking for is if you have skin in the game or not. And there are two ways that you can satisfy this requirement. The first is putting some money in your company, and the minimum amount they ask for is 5 million yen. The second way to do it is to get 2 local Japanese employees. They don't have to be Japanese nationals, but they do have to be residents. And they can't be part-timers or contractors. They have to be employed under your company, and really, ballpark, you should target their salary for about 3 million yen each. So it depends on how much help you need, but the lowest barrier to entry of those two is going to be the money in your Japanese business bank account. The second key requirement they're going to look at is whether or not your business can make money. They want your business in Japan to grow the economy, and if it doesn't make money, then they don't really want to give you a visa. If you've already got a company that you've maybe doing some remote work and have some contracts, it may be possible to leverage some of that experience that you've already had. But if you're starting out brand new, like I know some people are interested in becoming first-time business owners in Japan with this real estate opportunity, it helps to at least get some bookings ready or some letters of intent to say, oh, I want to buy this service or I want to stay there. The Japanese government is going to want some proof like that. And the last category that we're going to talk about really in detail today is office space. So the Japanese government wants to know where your business is. It can't be in a van and it can't be in your bedroom. They want a place with your sign out front, so if they want to, they can get a hold of you. And we're going to talk about that in detail now. So there's a problem with renting office space. Yeah, and have you guys heard stories about the challenges of just renting an apartment in Japan? So it's very similar with renting an office space, but worse. First of all, one of the big requirements is getting someone to even rent to you. If you've got a job and trying to get an apartment, it may be possible to leverage that job and say, oh, hey, I've got this contract, I'm making this money, please rent to me. If it's your own business, and especially if it's a new one, you're going to have to do some explaining to your landlord. Say, oh, I've got this idea, and I'm going to make this, and I don't have these customers yet, and there might be some teeth sucking going on about that, and a lot of no's. The other thing is that in order to get the business manager visa, you've got to have this rental up front, and so you've got to pay all the fees and key money, reikeen, I don't know the translation, thank you money. But you have to have all of it ready to go. Bride money. And shitsureikin. So it's a big expense up front, especially if you're starting something new. So if your business does not need an office to function, for example, you're an accountant or you're an IT contractor or something like that, is it really necessary to rent an office? Well, here's what the Japanese Ministry of Japan says about it. Now, as we discussed earlier, the place where you do business must be in a fixed location. It can't be co-working, it can't be in a van, it can't be in different spaces, it's got to be in one spot. But there are some stipulations that if you're a small business or venture, that the building that you use for your business may also be a residence. So that's very good news. We are going to look at some different possibilities today about what to do to avoid getting office space, and I'm going to show you 4 unique methods about that topic. So the first method is near and dear to my heart because the picture is a little grainy, sorry, but This is my old house that I used to live in when I was a coordinator for international relations. So I had my residence over here with this little American flag, and you would come in here, and I had a little kitchen over here, and then there was a bedroom and a living room upstairs. Now down here, there is a separate entrance to the front, which I never really had anything to do with. It was walled off from the rest of the house, and there was a lawyer that had his office there, and he was almost never there. The only time we ever interacted was when I parked in the wrong space, and somehow that would be the day that he was there, and he'd be like, oh, sorry, I'm really sorry. And that was the extent of our relationship. But just recently, I was looking back through my pictures after talking to one of my lawyer contacts, and she mentioned this rule. And I was like, oh, this is it. Because the key thing for having a residence as your office is that it has to have a designated business entrance. So it has to be walled off from the rest of the house, and it has to have its own in and out. So in this particular case, it was already built like that. And, using Akiyamart or something like that, there's got to be, thousands of houses, tens of thousands of houses in Japan that meet this criteria. The other option is you could work with someone like Arc Reform and find a bigger building and wall off one section of it and put a door on it, and boom, that's your house and that's your office all in one. So that's method number one. Yes. The second method here is having your residence and office separately, but instead of renting it, you could buy a cheap little unit somewhere and just use it as an office. There's 10 million empty houses in Japan and growing, and if you needed some place to put a sign on and say, this is where I do business, you could easily find one that's pretty low cost. Now, it's best if it's within a reasonable distance to your house so that the Japanese government isn't asking, like, well, why do you live in Kagoshima and have an office up in Hokkaido? So keep the story practical, but within reason, you can have a little unit that you use as your office. Now, the third method that I've thought about for satisfying the office situation is going to be interesting to a lot of you here who are interested in the short-term rental space. Using an Airbnb, as long as you have your own separate residence, can count as a business location for your visa application. Case in point, these guys are called the Benton Homestead. Sorry, the picture didn't quite load, but these slides will be available later. The Benton Homestead, they bought 2 units in the island of Shikoku, where apparently we just learned is going to be very cheap for the foreseeable future. And what they did is they renovated one right away for their Airbnb, and the other one they're slowly renovating as their living space. Now, in their application for their business manager visa, they had this Airbnb listed as their business, and that's something that you guys could think about too. So besides converting into a short-term rental, short-term rentals aren't for everybody. Another option for using empty real estate, especially historic ones like kominka, is converting them into a different type of rental business. And one is co-working. So this is one here in Osaka, southern Osaka, called Dot Commune. And they took these great bones of this old kominka and filled it with a bunch of desks, and people from Osaka come and hang out and drink green tea and coffee and do their work inside this beautiful house. And they have this great environment. And usually the way co-working spaces work is you have a monthly fee that you pay, and people kind of come and go. So that's another business model you could think about. And if it was a house like this, you could wall off a little space for your living quarters and have the rest be your business. Or similar to an Airbnb, you could have like 2 separate units that you work with. So the last option that we're going to talk about today is avoiding the business manager visa altogether for a certain amount of time. And there is a different type of visa called the startup visa that will allow you to avoid several of the key requirements of the business manager visa for a given amount of time. The issue with the startup visa is that it's not a national program, it's a regional program. So it really depends on which city you're in or prefecture you are in, and the benefits of that program will change. One of the most aggressive locations for the startup visa is in Fukuoka City. And this is great for people who are worried about the office space problem because they allow you up to 18 months to avoid it altogether. And during those 18 months, they give you access to free co-working spaces, like this one here in Engineer Cafe, Fukuoka. So that's a year and a half that you could spend investing your money doing other things and other parts of your business in Japan rather than focused on the office. So unless your business really needs an office space and really needs a rental, maybe you can find someone that's a really cool landlord and you get it really cheap. But do you have to get an office? No, you don't. There's several ways that we can avoid it. And today we talked about 4 different methods, and let's review real quick. The first method is to buy a residence that has a separate entrance that you can classify as your business address. The second method is to buy a second cheap house and use it as your office space. The third method is to have a residence and then also have a separate rental space. It could be Airbnb, it could be short-term rental, other platform, or it could be something like co-working. And the last option we talked about is the startup visa. You can avoid this issue of office space altogether for potentially up to 18 months. So that's pretty much all I have to say about office space today. But shameless plug time. These are the types of problems that I help my clients solve. We think about what type of life do they want to have in Japan? What do they want to do? What's the why? And then we think about what's their business model? What are they going to be doing? Are they going to be a construction company? Are they going to be somebody who has mental health support? Are they going to be somebody that's a programmer, maybe making some software? Or are they going to be doing the short-term rental business as their main source of income? There's a lot of different options with this visa type. So then what we do is we hone in on the visa that's going to best fit both their business and their lifestyle. And for my money, I think you should be happy in Japan. And I think one of the best ways to be happy is to be your own boss. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening to me today. And I do offer a free consultation right up here in this QR code if you want to get in touch and we can have a chat. But otherwise, we can open up to questions.
And here they come. Yes, I'll run the mic to you. Give me a second. Yes, please.
Thank you. So for me, there was one step that was missing here, kind of an important one. I don't live in Japan.
Yeah.
So not living in Japan, you can't open a bank account to send the 50 million yen to. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you even... before you can apply for this visa, you have to have money here in Japan, and you can't open a bank account if you're not here. So what do you do in that scenario?
So what you'd have to do first is open the entity. And if you have an entity, then under the entity, you can open a bank account for your business.
So you can open a kabushiki gaisha without being here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and a godo gaisho.
Okay,
So that would be the first step, is get the entity and then get the bank account for the entity.
okay, and you do that?
I don't help people with that, but I explain that you need to do that. What I do is I do like the pre-departure stuff.
Where do you set the goal for that?
In our experience setting up companies for non-resident customers, you will have to appoint someone who's a resident as your company representative director, and that makes the bank a lot more lenient, and they let you open the bank account. There are companies like ours, lawyers, accountants, there are a lot of service providers that would provide that service if you need a resident director for a period of a few months until the infrastructure is all set up, and then change them over to the resident owners.
So basically, it's like you're like renting a partner for 3 months.
Basically, yeah. You're renting a CEO.
And stop me if I'm getting too in the weeds, but what does that cost? That whole process? you just
Between
mentioned?
20 to 50,000 yen a month, usually, depending on who you get the service from. And the kidney, yeah.
So $200 a month, you can buy someone's signature for $200.
2 to 4, depending on who's available, what kind of business. Not all of them take all kinds of businesses. If it's an accountant, they might want to also be your designated accountant for the tax. But yeah, generally speaking, between $200 to $400 a month for as many months as you need them.
Okay, and that's a service you guys provide?
It's the service that we provide for particular companies who are our clients in other aspects as well. We can talk about that later.
Okay.
And what I would do is refer you to somebody like Ziv. We would think about what your goals are and what you're trying to do. And if it was, I want to be a business owner, I want to do it, I'd say, okay, great. Let's think about where you're going to do it. And then you're like, okay, I'm ready to open a bank account. Then I would send you to somebody local in Japan, because I'm based in the US. And it might be Ziv in Kyushu, or it might be somebody else in a different area, and really get you all set up with your business.
And sorry, one last quick question. Where do you research the startup visas? What prefectures? Is it prefectures or cities?
That's a good question. There are 2 programs that have the startup visa. It's the special zones, and then there's one by METI. So if you look on my website, I have a list of all of them. So you can see which prefectures have them. But off the top of my head, it's places like Hokkaido Prefecture, but then in Niigata, it's Niigata City, not Niigata Ken. So look up japanremotely.com, and there's a whole, every single startup visa program I could find is on there.
We're going to let them. We're going to move on to other people's questions, but the Q&A panel is coming up right after this, so Nick will stay with us, and we'll have more Q&A. But there was somebody in the back there who wanted to ask, I think, too.
Anyone? You need to charge that.
So basically, I have a question about your office hacks. Are you going to run afoul of any sort of zoning laws? Can you literally have an office anywhere? Is that okay with the government?
Yeah, you should check with the zoning laws too.
So there's gonna be, you assume there's going to be places that are going to be like, you can't do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
If I may comment,
yeah.
because I used to have a business manager visa, and I rented an office for it. And I know you say don't do it, and I understand where you're coming from. But the nice thing about renting an office, I rent it from a serviced office space. And this is really it. You need to have a door that closes. And with a floor-to-window door. It's really silly. It costs you money, but that's the way it is. And the immigration agency here is not flexible.
Yeah.
The Japanese government is not flexible usually, and the immigration agency is one of the least flexible part of the government. Yeah, no, you don't know. And so I hear you, but I think the nice thing about renting an office, it's cheap. It's not that cheap, but it's fast, and you can pull the plug on it anytime. I just want to put that out there that, if you invest in a home, I mean, this is much less liquid or flexible. So I don't know if you should completely rule it out, and maybe there's something that you should offer to your client. I'd put it out there as an option.
Yeah.
Maybe not the option that you think is the most recommendable, but I don't think you should rule it out. My personal view.
Yeah, definitely you don't have to, but you certainly can. Yeah.
But also remember, when you're renting an office, sometimes you've got to put 10 months down. 10 months down for deposit. It's not just like, when you're doing chintai, like 1 month reikin, 1 month shikikin. 10 months, that's a commitment. I'm not sure about serviced offices, like ServCorp, and they're so expensive there. Yeah. Yeah. I rent desks in my office too, by the way. Just putting it out there.
There you go. Oh, up here?
Just a question.
We need it for the stream.
Just a question. What does, when you have a manager's visa, what is your taxation based on? Is it based on local income only, or is it international, worldwide?
So the question is about global taxation when you have a manager visa. So for any long-term resident of Japan, you have to pay money on the income, of course, that you make in Japan, and you have to pay money on the income, the active income that you make outside of Japan. For a certain amount of time, I believe it's 5 years or until you get permanent residency, your passive income will not be taxed by the Japanese government. So that's a trade-off. I also talk to my customers a lot about, they say, oh, I want to get one of these fast-track programs to get permanent residency right away. And a lot of these people who say that, it takes money to do that. So I have to tell them, well, that's great, you can do that, you can be in Japan full term, but then you lose those 5 years of being able to not pay tax on your global passive income. So that's kind of the answer, yeah.
You're not getting citizenship or permanent residency. That is not the objective. The objective is just to get the visa to be able to operate legally.
So if you have a visa, after 5 years, they automatically count you as a permanent resident, whether or not you have that status. So from a tax perspective, you are a permanent resident. From a residency status, you are not a permanent resident. So the Japanese IRS says, well, permanent enough for us, give me your money. But
So can we do a distinction, please? If you appoint a local to become your manager, then it is just the income of the business and her income or his income from the business that is subject to tax, and not the corporate or whatever outside.
So the question is, what if you have a manager for the business? Are you, in this scenario, are you also living full-time in Japan? If you are not living in Japan, then it'll be fine. Then you won't be paying tax on your global income. This is for people who have a long-term resident visa.
And sorry, can we have to move on to a couple of other questions from the stream, and then we also have to move out. So one here from the stream, and again, we're going to have the Q&A. The big Q&A panel is the next one up. So please continue to write down those questions. 2 questions from the stream for Nick. Firstly, for people starting with real estate, would a letter of intent offer that they made to purchase a property for minpaku or long-term lease, whatever the business plan is, would that satisfy the requirements for the business manager visa if there's an office space appearing on a property that hasn't been settled on yet?
You mean, yeah, I kind of get the question. So if they didn't have the office yet, but they have a letter of intent to get an office space, I don't know.
Is what? Sorry?
The question is that, like, he's intending to buy a property but hasn't yet.
Mm-hmm.
Say to have a business. That sounds to be the question.
Yeah, jumping the gun a little bit, can they apply based on the fact that they're on the way to purchase a property? They haven't signed the contract or paid anything yet, but they're getting there. Do you know if that would fly with the immigration department?
I'm not sure. In that situation, it might be better to go for the startup visa and then work through those issues once you're on the ground. That's what I would think.
Okay. And the second question there, which, sorry, Zoom is not my friend today. Okay, I'll ask that in a minute. Go back to the audience. Sorry, go Tracy.
I have a question. The business manager visa, is that different from the investor visa?
That's a good question.
Because the investor visa, you can sponsor a dependent, say a cleaner, you can sponsor a maid.
Yeah.
Can you do that on a business manager visa?
So recently, there's been a change of language about the manager investor visa. They've just taken off the investor part because it was confusing, because people thought that, like many other countries like Portugal or Spain, that you could just invest money in a company and then just come and hang out. With the investor management visa, even before, you're not allowed to not be involved. You have to actively do the visa. So the answer to your question is that the manager investor visa and the business manager visa are the same visa. It's just different language they use for it now. So the answer is yes, you can sponsor.
And then you can sponsor a maid.
Yeah, you can sponsor a maid,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Anyone who's looking at getting this type of visa, being able to sponsor a cleaner, especially if you are running a short-term rental, it's gold dust, because there are so many amazing cleaning people who are here that are looking for a sponsor, and I highly recommend that you look for that, because you've then got a business and you've got a staff and you're sponsoring someone who is extremely grateful for the opportunity.
So speaking of benefits like that, another kind of human benefit of the business manager visa is that you're also allowed to sponsor your parents to come live with you. Yeah. So this is a question that a lot of my clients have, is like what to do about my aging parents. And I had a woman come to me who was a naturalized Japanese citizen, and even she didn't have the access to be able to bring her parents to Japan. It's only on the highly skilled professional visa and on the business manager visa that you can do that. So if you want to bring your parents, there's some conditions with it. You have to have some need of your parents to come. It's not for their benefit, it's for yours. So, for example, both you and your spouse, or just you're a one-person family and you're working and you can't take care of your chores or something, you can tell the government, I need my parent to come to help me. A more convincing argument is if you have small children and say, Grandma and Grandpa need to come help, otherwise I can't work.
Last question from the stream, and then we'll have to call it and head on. Under a business manager visa, is there an expectation of a minimum level of income / revenue? Is it solely governed by what your business plan is, or is there a minimum that you have to make in taxable income? And is it more stringent for people who are running an Airbnb or other types of businesses?
That's a great question. Thanks, streamers. There is no official target that you must hit. I've heard from my lawyer, who's very conservative. She says that a good target to go for is 10 million yen in revenue. But with 10 million yen, that's about 70,000 US dollars. But there's no hard and fast rule. So if you are starting out a business, have a business plan in place, have a forecast. If it's brand new and you've never done it before, think about doing the startup visa first so that you can work with local Japanese government to get a sense of how well your business could go. I know in the case of the Benton Homestead, who we talked about earlier, they had a really great experience with the startup visa because they were referred to a local business advisor who helped them craft a business plan that was which they were able to get their visa secured with.
And subsidies and loans.
Yeah. It depends on the location, but it's a great program that you should think about. Again, on my website, there's a list of all the different prefectures. Maybe someday I'll send it to Akiyamart and they can overlay it on their map. There's rumors that there's going to be a nationwide startup visa, but just rumors at this point. We'll just have to see. All right. Thank you very much. ありがとうございました.
So there you have it, Nick Woolsey from Japan remotely. And as he mentions, if you're interested in moving to Japan, highly recommend to check out his website and the services that his company can offer to make the transition easier and smoother for you. And if you're also interested in real estate property in Japan, be sure to check out the full summit page, including all presentations from the day, photos, videos. You can find it at the top of our website, nippontradings.com. That's NIPPON tradings with an S, all one word, .com, and we'll link to the page in this episode's show notes as well, of course. Now, if you found value in this podcast, we'd really love it if you could like, subscribe, and even better, share the episode with anyone in your network who might also find value in it. And of course, leave us a review or a comment wherever you might have found this podcast. Your word of mouth is our oxygen, and it helps us reach more and more and more people who might find value in the topics that we cover here. We love hearing from you. And of course, if you want to be on the podcast, either as a sponsor, we can definitely put you in the ears of anyone interested in moving to Japan, or even better, as a guest, either via recorded conversation or just send in your questions, audio, video, written form. We'll try to give you the answers you're looking for. Just drop us a line here in the comment section or via DM or on email, info@nipponbridge.com. That's INFO, info@NIPPON, nipponbridge.com. All one word. We want to know what you think. Hope to have you with us again next time. And until then, have a great day or night ahead. Yoroshiku.